The Arab world is in turmoil. There are protests and riots in the streets, and there's fighting between Jews and Arabs in Palestine, and violence. And why do Jews and... Today we're going to answer some basic questions that will help you understand the modern conflict. Before we start, let me clarify something. When talking about ancient history, it's important not to conflate ethnicity with religion. The term Jew or Judaism didn't exist until around the 6th century BCE. Before then, people in ancient Judea were just people. They followed different religions, but they were all Judeans. Similarly, in the modern day, people who follow Islam or Christianity in the region are called Arabs, even though they might be of different ethnicities. With that said, let's go back in time to approximately 3000 BCE. The region we know today as the Middle East was home to many different civilizations. In particular, there were two powerful empires at the eastern end of the Mediterranean, Egypt in the southwest and the Hittite Empire in the northeast. At the center of the two, nestled between the Mediterranean Sea, the Jordan River and the desert of the Arabian Peninsula, lay the land we now call Israel and Palestine. This area would later become known as Canaan. It's here where our story begins. We don't know much about prehistory in this region, but archaeological evidence suggests that Canaan was inhabited by small agricultural communities of what we today might call Bedouins or nomads. They lived simple lives raising sheep and goats, gathering fruit and vegetables and trading with nearby settlements. We have no written records from this time period, so what we know comes from archaeologists who uncover remnants of villages, tools, and other artifacts. As far as we can tell, these early Canaanites were peaceful people living in small tribes ruled by tribal elders. Then in 2000 BCE, a new group of people arrived in Canaan. These were the Canaanites, a collection of Semitic tribes from Mesopotamia. They spoke a language related to modern Arabic, and they brought with them new gods and customs. Over the next few hundred years, the Canaanites gradually conquered the native Canaanites and established themselves as the dominant power. They settled into city life, building large cities like Sidon, Byblos, and Tyre, which became centers of trade and culture. In the mid-2nd millennium BCE, the Egyptians began expanding northwards out of control. Of Nubia, their empire soon encompassed all of Egypt. Meanwhile, another empire was rising in the east. The Hittites had expanded into Anatolia and were now a major power in the region. Caught in the middle, the Canaanites knew they couldn't compete militarily with either Egypt or the Hittites, so they tried something else. They allied with the Egyptians against the Hittites and opened up trade routes with Egypt, bringing wealth and prosperity to Canaan. But in 1200 BCE, both the Hittite and Egyptian empires collapsed. There were invasions of the so-called peoples of the sea, and both Egypt and the Hittite heartland were overrun. Canaan was also affected, and many cities were destroyed. The Canaanites had relied heavily on trade with Egypt, and without the Egyptians to protect them, they were vulnerable to attack. But Canaan was never fully conquered. Instead, several smaller kingdoms arose in its place. The most powerful of these was Israel, a kingdom that emerged along the central mountainous spine of Canaan. Unlike the Canaanite kingdoms, which were coastal city-states, Israel was an agrarian kingdom. Its strength lay in its control of the interior of Canaan. Other kingdoms included Judah in the south and Phoenicia in the north. All three would play important roles in the coming centuries. In the 9th century BCE, the Assyrians rose to prominence in Mesopotamia. Their army was the first in history to truly be an army. That is, soldiers were conscripted and made up a significant portion of the population. The Assyrians conquered much of the Levant, including northern Palestine and Phoenicia. But the Assyrians did not rule directly. Instead, they left local rulers in place, collecting tribute in return for protection. In the mid-8th century, however, the Assyrian Empire collapsed. Soon after, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, centered around modern-day Iraq, took control of Palestine. But in 539 BCE, the Persians defeated the Babylonians and took control of the region. Under the Persians, Canaan enjoyed a golden age of peace and prosperity. Many of the great works of the Hebrew Bible date from this time, including the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. In 586 BCE, the Babylonians had destroyed Jerusalem and deported much of the Jewish population. But later the Persian king Cyrus allowed them to return and rebuild their temple. By the time of Alexander the Great in the 4th century BCE, the Levant, including Canaan, was part of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Alexander's empire was short-lived, and upon his death, Canaan came under the control of the Ptolemaic Empire based in Egypt. The Ptolemies ruled over Canaan for a couple of centuries, but in 141 BCE, they lost control of the region to the Seleucids, who were based in Mesopotamia. The Seleucids were a branch of the larger Greek empire of the Diadochi, which had succeeded Alexander's empire. The Seleucid king Antiochus IV of Epiphanes attempted to Hellenize or make Greek the religion and culture of Canaan, angering the Jewish population. The Hasmonean revolt broke out in 134 BCE under the leadership of the Jewish priest Mattathias and his son Judah Maccabee. The rebels fought guerrilla warfare against the Seleucids, eventually recapturing Jerusalem in 126 BCE. The revolt ended successfully for the Jews, but the Hasmonean dynasty that had led the revolt quickly grew oppressive. They alienated the non-Jewish population of their kingdom and provoked the wrath of the Roman Empire. In 63 BCE, Pompey the Great, famous for conquering many lands in the Mediterranean, invaded and defeated the Hasmoneans. Canaan was once again subject to foreign rule. This time, it was the Roman Empire. Over the next 2 centuries, the Romans would rule directly through a series of client kings, and then as a province of the empire. By the time of Jesus, the land had been under Roman rule for nearly 2 centuries. Some Jews looked forward to a Messiah who would free them from foreign domination. Others saw the Romans as an occupying force and awaited a more radical kind of deliverance. Jesus himself addressed the issue of foreign domination in his teaching, and his followers were almost certainly influenced by contemporary Jewish rebellions against Rome. But historians agree that there was a Jewish preacher named Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified by the Romans. The New Testament, including the 4 Gospels, is considered scripture by Christians and tells the story of Jesus' life and teachings. According to the Gospels, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, which is in Judea, the southern part of the land we're discussing. He traveled throughout the region, preaching about gods and performing miracles. He gathered followers and taught them how to live according to God's laws. His teachings were revolutionary and attracted a diverse following, including tax collectors and religious outcasts. Eventually, he was arrested and put on trial before the Sanhedrin, a Jewish court. The Jewish leaders accused Jesus of blasphemy and called for his execution. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, ultimately ordered Jesus crucified. After his death, his followers believed that he had risen from the dead and was divine, and Christianity spread throughout the region and beyond. But Jesus wasn't the only religious leader to emerge in the region during this period. In the city of Mecca on the Arabian Peninsula, a prophet named Muhammad, revered by Muslims as the Prophet Muhammad, would appear in the 7th century AD. Like Jesus, Muhammad's life and teachings would change the course of history. Throughout the time we've been discussing, the land we now call Israel and Palestine was known to the inhabitants simply as the land of Canaan. This is the earliest use of the term Canaan in ancient texts. The word may have originated from the ancient Egyptians and originally referred to the Phoenician coastal city of Sidon. It's also possible that the name comes from the Canaanite language. Today, the term Canaan has taken on a biblical meaning among Jews and refers to the ancestral homeland promised to Abraham and his descendants. Among Arabs, Canaan is the historic home of the Canaanite people and the place where Islam began. And it's also where the Israelites enslaved Prophet Joseph. Orientalism is a European fascination with the Middle East that began during the Enlightenment, when Europeans were taking a renewed interest in ancient art and literature. So what happens next? Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more.